Hey, Sir Black Belt, if you actually want to do this case, I'd actually probably pay you to do this case. If I had funds like Stop ULEZ campaigns have got funds. They've got like about 15, 20 grand in campaign funds. If I had campaign funds like that, I'd actually do this. So what it actually comes down to is, and this is the reason, the Road and Rail Act, they've kind of done a little homage to this original by updating that 1988 seatbelt law to the 2003 Railway Act clause. Why would they update something to do with roads and highways in a rail act? It seems a modern rail act, you would just leave it alone. That they've updated it in the rail act when it's like a homage, basically, back to the origins. But they don't change the wording. They update it into it without changing it. Now, the thing is, you've got the original act, and then they make these seatbelt regulations, but they don't revoke the seatbelt exemptions in the Road Traffic Act, in the 1988 Act. And then they update it with that Rail and Road Act. Now, this is the thing. The meaning, when they wrote the meaning in those acts, it refers to something. And they're not actually changing what they're referring to. It says to prescribed distance and in local area. Now, this is the thing. What is that prescribed distance that is referring to? This is the thing. It does mean something. It has a reference point. And if the wording doesn't change, then the reference point cannot change. So where does it refer to? Well, it refers to the prescribed distances. And what are they? What are they? It was local areas. It said local areas. And so you think, well, that's funny. It said local areas and then it said prescribed distances. And this is without... Let's not get on... This is completely separate from those seatbelt acts, right? This is the meaning in the other acts, or the pure meaning of it. So it's all down to where you're delivering to. It's almost like what they're saying is, it actually matters that the documents that you're using and the company that you're working for, it's like like in the driving, like when, like it can be used in as a defense, if like basically when you're delivering and if you exceed the speed limit, if your employer's got a schedule and if you've got to stick to that schedule, you use that in law. The act of law, which makes it law for your employer pushing you on a schedule, which can be used in a defense, the legislation, the clause is invoking that there will be a document in existence which you will use in law, like your delivery schedule, and that will be used in defense to prove that you had a schedule and so forth, that your employer was to put you around. So notice that your delivery notes from work and schedule of your boss becomes invoked to be used through the law. So the legislation is bringing in other documents, right? So with this local area, so delivery vehicles had to have a license to operate in an area. So, like when you were delivering in a village, like a company would have a license to deliver in that village and run vehicles, literally like a bus route. It's better to imagine it like a bus route. You know, you got bus route, yeah, it's all set out. So that would probably figure into this exemption, you know, for exceeding the speed limit of your employer and a schedule as well, because that would prove what your delivery route was for not wearing the seatbelt, right? Now, they changed the wording to prescribed distance, but that has got nothing to do with this, the meters, you know, when they brought in the 2005, or in the seatbelt regulations, that wasn't even prescribed then. So when it says the prescribed distance, when they write that word, it was and is referring to those local areas that will be defined by your employer and your delivery routes, right? Now, what they did is they brought in seatbelt law, but they never revoked that 1988 Act, which was updated by the 2003 Railway Act, and the wording still says it's prescribed distance, which means and meant it's referring to delivery notes in the local area of what you're prescribed to deliver around, and so forth. Just similarly to, you know, it can be used as a defence if you know, you've got a schedule by an employer, you know, and you have to get, you know, you're going to be late or whatever, or, you know. So it's similarly to that. Now, what they did is the latest update to the Seatbelt Regulations Act brought in that distance, you know, whatever it is, 50 metres or 150 metres, whatever. I know that I should know exactly what it is, but I've just looked at it, but I'm just trying to remember this at the moment. Whatever it says, trust me on it, whatever it says, so many metres or whatever, but that act is in new. And when it said prescribed distance, what he's done is, he thought he'd be clever and, I'm going to prescribe a distance now, right? He prescribes a distance in a new act when the old act has a meaning of prescribed distance and local areas that doesn't change. It doesn't say that when that is written down, it hasn't changed. In the 2003 Rail Act, it says prescribed distance. Well, it means and meant to do with what your delivery notes say, where you're delivering around. The distance wasn't prescribed by the government. The underlying existential legislation says that the distance is prescribed by your employer and by your delivery routes where you're licensed to drive in and where you're prescribed to go through that. Not by the government. But what that clever Secretary of State tried to do, he thought it was clever, is, I'm gonna be the guy who prescribes the distance. But the meaning of the law is referring to the employer and the delivery route notes. But he didn't change the meaning of that. Because he can't have, because he hadn't changed the wording of it. So he's tried to be clever, and he's gone, hey, tell you what, we'll prescribe a distance of 50 metres, put that in, and then, but we won't change the wording of what the meaning of prescribed distance means, because it was, and I was still always referring to, where your route is on your delivery notes and what is set by the employer. Just like, you know, if you exceed the speed limit and it can be used as a defence against a charge, you know, if you prove that you've got a schedule to stick to or whatever, like that, right? And he hasn't changed the wording of it at all, or meaning, but he thought they'd be clever and prescribe a distance in another act without revoking or changing the other one. So he's created he's brought in an act which he's claiming is enforceable for a set distance, when another act is saying that this prescribed distance isn't set by the government. It's set by the employer and the schedule and the route, like a bus. And when you think about it, why would you have delivery drivers in vans not having to having to wear the seatbelt and put it on and off every 50 metres if they're going over it, when there's people flying past on buses for, like, you know, Leeds to Scarborough or whatever? It don't make sense. What he did is he thought, I'm sure this was the Labour government as well. We can check though. They thought, right, working class people, let's fine them. Let's slap a fine on them. We can make loads of money out of this. We'll get loads of seatbelt fine money out of them, right? They thought they'd be clever. Meant to be a government who support the working class, but like Tony Blair, he's pure evil demon. He's not for the working class at all. It's like saying, oh, freedom of information. We're going to open up information. What he meant is, let's crack open the can, get a tin opener out on the government while we're buying up all these other companies and taking over BlackRock Vanguard. We'll make loads of freedom of information requests, find out everything there is to know about the government from our third-party position out of government and make loads of information on them, and then we'll infiltrate them and then take them over, which is essentially what they've done and what we're now catching up with them on and what we're facing. The takeover of democracy, the stripping of our rights, and all these big corporate organisations taking over saying we don't have rights on there. Cameron's selling off the telephone companies when, we had free mail and certain mail for democratic purposes figured into it for elections as well and so forth. And this is where we are now, and we're just realising that we're being taken over by a unified corporate interest this is what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is talking about now on his channel. Watch his newest videos. There's a woman who's got like a company and she's had all her company taken off her and she's been prosecuted by these big corporate entities and they've just been doing lots of things that are very nasty to people and they're trying to buy people's houses. All that's going on. If you are an advocate of this globalist corporate takeover, then, fair enough. You won't want to argue our side unless we get the pound notes out. But this is part of it. It all started back here because, you got we're working class, Jeremy Corbyn, Corbyn. It's not. What it actually is I will gradually start to strip people's rights away from them and start fining them for ridiculous stuff. Oh, there's some working class guys here. Let's start slapping some, get the bee sting out and start slapping them more seatbelt fines. Well, there's a bus coming past with 30 people on it. Some of them stood up. Some of them stood up with shopping bags in their hands, just behind the driver. We're going to fly through the freaking top window. Oh, this bus can take 50 people standing. They're taking the piss. And they've done it with this because this is a very good example of lots of other things they've been doing. This creates a contradiction in law. It's a perfect example of a Secretary of State for Transport who thinks he's Superman, he can see through lead, he can do anything he wants, the world is his oyster, yet he's defying meaning. It's written down in law. It has a meaning, it refers to something, and what he did is he thought he'd come along, but he hasn't revoked it, and he hasn't changed what it means. He's just conjured up another act. And he says, I'm the guy writing the prescriptions now. Are you? Really? But that act says that it's the employer who writes the prescriptions and sets out the routes. Not the Secretary of State for Transport. I'm prescribing everyone now to 50 metres, but that's not practical, is it? The other act is still in effect, and it's enforceable to a longer distance and provable by documents and so forth, delivery schedules. The distance that he brought in cannot override a law which is still in effect and still as a reference point, and actually is not the prescription of the Secretary of State and never meant that. He was trying to be clever, and what he did is he messed up. He made a cock-up of the law. And this, we could probably find more and more evidence of this all through history. And these are these pricks, these pimpernels, and they need prosecuting. They need criminally prosecuting. It's professional negligence, but it's not only professional negligence. Just think of all the money they made out of seatbelt fines. Who's been doing it? Or the police, right? I'm pretty sure it was the guy from Harrogate or Nesbitt area. I've forgotten his name now, but I knew it off by heart at the time. one of the Harrogate or Knaresborough area MPs, Secretary of State of Transport, that nupty, him, they don't really, they're not really competent because they're getting elected. This is what they say, you know, people are getting elected to become MPs and they don't actually have to have any qualifications. They don't have to have qualifications. They don't need them. And the problem is they keep calling themselves these right and honourable. Oh, my right honourable friend. When they start calling themselves that all the time, they actually start believing it. And no matter what they do, they're still calling each other it. So they can be doing things wrong and making errors, but they're still referring to each other as right and honourable. So it's almost kind of like reinforcement psychology. Even though you're completely incompetent, you've never seen right and you've never been honourable, but yet they're still calling them it. This is why I refuse to honour them, and I refuse to say they're right, because they're not. They need to be shouted at. They need to be chastised and brought under control, and they need to be impeached and prosecuted. And we need to get rid of these titles, particularly when they don't deserve them, and they're not up to the Petitions Committee. Oh, standards. The Petitions Committee are claiming of all these standards they've got, but the government's never seen standards. In fact, you know, there is no time limit for petitions. They're claiming there's no legislation. Half of the rules they're coming out with that exist for the Petitions Committee, and I've challenged them on it. Then we got 4 times as many signatures for a referendum in Wales, the entire country. They're not giving us it. Where is it? They don't want to, you know, that's an order made by the people. You know, it says if you get equal to 5%, you can have a referendum. Right, okay, you hand it in. They don't want to do it. They won't obey. We need to enforce obedience, you know, and they have these whips. What do we have? Well, you know, this is what the farmers are doing in France. And this is why we need rights, because otherwise they will just continue with this corporate takeover of the world. And then you can see where they're going with it. They don't want to speak to you on YouTube. You know, speak to man because my face ain't listening. Oh, it's our policies. You can see how they regard and treat us with their policies, right? And with that interview that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. just did with that lady who had a children's gym, a little kid's gym, right? That is how the big corporate companies are treating us now, literally like cattle with numbers on, and not even fit cattle. We're not even in good shape cattle. And this is, they're living in a delusional world where they have got all this money and, you know, they've got the protection of the police and so forth, and they're living in a bubble world, and they're going to, you know, they'll use war now. They'll use their war machines and weapons and tanks. They'll just blow us up, you know, like they do with Ukraine, to threaten us and intimidate us, so we do what they want, rather than just, you know, putting their hands up and surrendering, and, you know, splitting the cash between everybody equally, and giving us as rights and having a fair vote on everything. No elected MP in this country should, if they've only got that position through being elected and voted in, they shouldn't believe in anything else other than democracy, because otherwise they won't be there. If they want to, you know, get the tanks and bombs out and viruses and so forth, then they should, you know, sign up to the army themselves, not make us sign up to it. You know, they need to make a decision and stop pretending. Oh, hello, sir. Shake your hand. Oh, I'd like to do a business deal with you. Yes, of course, my workers will deliver the widgets. Of course they will, you know. You know, click your fingers 3 times, you know. There you go, sir. That's £5 million. Oh, it's amazing to do business with you. Yes, and we'll go on holiday to Branson Island together, you know, President Obama. you know, it's all friendly here, you know. Oh, it's all right, I'm all right, Jack, you know. It's all right for these people, but for us, nah, slap another seatbelt fine on. Well, but you don't even know what the seatbelt law means or what it's referring to. You know, this is the thing. Fines. They're just bringing in all these laws to penalise the working class. Now it's, Transport for London cameras and fines for vehicles because they want to prize us out of all these vehicles and put us all in surveillance vehicles that have Bluetooth control, you know, and engines just shut down with the click of your fingers or whatever they want. You know, this is it, which is ultimately their plan for us. You know, that's what they want to do to us, you know. Open the pod doors, Hal, you know, doors not opening, you know, which you can't really... The thing with black belt is like, motion detected outside. You know, fair enough if you're a barrister and you're dealing with, you know, legal cases and criminals, but fair enough. You know, these ministers are criminals. This is the thing. They are criminals. They're making contradictory legislation to penalise the working class for no reason. Why would you prescribe a 50 or 150 metre distance for delivering when you're already prescribed to not wear it in the local area? When there's buses going past with 30 or 40 or 50 people on that could just suddenly brake and everyone fly through the window and with not even holding on to anything, they have shopping bags in both hands. They're not even required to have both hands free on the bus. They're not even required to have both hands free. You know, if 20 people stand, they're not even required to hold on to anything. They might have 2 shopping bags. It's just dumb. And then you've got police catching the bus now, walking up and down, stood up when there's empty seats, kneeling on the seats, climbing over bars to try and spot people so they can fine holding on to a mobile phone. Probably seatbelt, not wearing the seatbelt as well. And the coppers are stood up on the bus. You know, it would be ironic if one of them went through the window, wouldn't it? Then they'd be wanting to get the seatbelt laws changed on buses, you know. If you had, a superintendent, a flying Superman, look, it's chief superintendent.